Hello and welcome to the Gratitude and Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Mittich. I am an actor, a yoga instructor, a former ballet dancer, but above all, I am a wildly curious person. So I've spent the past several years researching and studying human behavior, why we do what we do, who and what we innately are, what my purpose is on this planet. And I'm here to share the insights and the tools that curiosity has led me to uncover, in hopes of helping you to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of your own life, and in hopes of inspiring you to become the person that you have always wanted to be. So pull up a chair or go for a walk, hop on that treadmill or go for a drive, and join me as I explore what it is to be a human being in this lifetime. Hello, and welcome back to another episode. I have a very special guest with me today. She is a feminine embodiment and leadership coach. She is a breathwork facilitator, a yoga teacher. She runs monthly breathwork and sound healing events for women in Vancouver. And she is my own personal coach. Please let me introduce the incredible Blythe Hubbard. Hi, Blythe.
Hello, what an introduction. I'm like beaming. I'm so excited to riff with you today and talk about all the things. So thank you for bringing me on.
Of course. I mean, before we dive in, I don't even know if I need to say this to you, but we've been working together now for, I don't even know how many months, 9, 10, something like that. And working with you has not only changed my life and empowered me, but it has let me accept myself and accept so many different parts of myself. And working with you, and I definitely want to touch on this in this episode of why I think it is so important for everyone to work with someone in a professional capacity that they feel called to. But the support that you have offered me and the guidance you have offered me, there are no words in any language that I speak that fill that. So my gratitude for you is so immense, and I'm so honored to have you on the show. So thank you.
Oh my God, you're making me blush. Honestly, the feeling is so mutual. You're such a dream to work with because of, well, so many different reasons, but just, and I've told you this before and I will continue to tell you, you're a dream client. So thank you for showing up like week after week, being so hungry and focused and determined to just be your, best self and achieve all the things you want to achieve. So kudos to you, babe.
Thank you. Okay, let's dive in because I want to start with the nervous system. This is something you have introduced me to in a whole new way, is understanding my own nervous system, understanding what it is to push the limits of my nervous system. And before working with you, I always tried to quote unquote solve problems or look at parts of me very intellectually. And you've really taught me to understand it from a nervous system, from a physical, from an embodied way. So can you just talk to me, to people who aren't familiar with the nervous system or how that impacts us in this kind of work in our day-to-day living? Can you just talk to me about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think when it comes to the nervous system, the kind of basic level or information most people know is they know we have what's called fight or flight, right? And then there's the rest and digest. And that's kind of like the nervous system 101 initial things to know. And so what happens is there's something called the stress response. And so what this means is when we go through inevitable stress, right, we want to feel that stress move into like activation or what is called fight or flight and kind of go through what is called the stress response, where you feel the stress, you express the stress or feel it all the way through so that you can then return to a baseline and get back into rest and digest. Well, we live in a culture and a society that thrives on the hustle, right? And we're all so overstimulated. So, for example, when someone's like, "Oh, I'm just chilling on the couch scrolling," that's not rest and digest. That is, you're stimulated, you're looking into your phone. There's, we're all comparing ourselves to other people. Like there is a level of stress in the body that's not actually restorative, right? So I think when it comes to the nervous system collectively, people are not aware at how much they're just day to day keeping themselves in an activated stress response or a fight or flight stress response. And so it's so insidious how much it's just like kind of creeped into things that people wouldn't consider like stressful on the body. So that's why I'm a big advocate of things like breath work or, exercise, movement, cold exposure, because those are controlled ways in which we are choosing to put ourselves into activation or fight or flight. And then through that process, we complete that stressed response, that cycle, and return to more of a baseline. So I can get really nerdy on all this. So if at any point you're like, whoa, stop, like, and you want
No.
to ask me more. But I think something that I want to make really clear is being bored and not looking into a screen, getting outside, like walking, putting your feet on the grass, sometimes even just walking without a podcast in your ears or music in your ears and actually just being present, that's actually such a beautiful way to start to redefine our baseline. And I think about like younger generations today and how addicted they are to their phones and the constant scrolling and it's wreaking havoc on nervous systems. And it makes sense now why, teenagers, the mental health crisis, so it's really important for people to prioritize completing the stress response every single day. And there's a really amazing book called Complete the Stress Cycle. Or what is it called? Burnout break. Oh, I don't know. I'll find the book and I'll tell you about it so you can include it. But it's a really beautiful book that talks about all the different ways that you can complete the stress cycle. Just to give you a little bit of examples, movement every day, going for like a walk to wrap up your workday. No screens first thing in the morning, no screens, like an hour before bed, and like really consciously choosing to de-stimulate yourself every single day. Because what happens is it compounds day after day after day. And then people are in burnout or they're chronic brain fog, fatigue, overwhelm. So I'll stop there for now and let you ask the next.
Yeah. So when I used to think stress, I would only think severe, quote unquote, severe stress, like the death of a loved one, losing your job, not being able to pay your bills, mortgage, rent, whatever it is. But I have learned for myself that there's what I still call in my head, quote unquote, little stresses, but it's those little stresses that for me, when I don't allow myself time to spend inside my body, as I call it, instead of like outside energetically, to just like be inside, whether that's meditation, whether that's walking through the woods or somewhere, being by the ocean, like just something. For me, it's always nature that grounds me the most, and just like getting my feet in nature. But I think a lot of people similar to me consider stress like, well, I'm not stressed, I'm working 50 hours a week, but I'm not stressed, I'm happy, everything's great, I'm making all this money. But there's still a stress on our nervous system. Even though we feel good, there's still a stress that's happening. And for me, before working with you, even if I was in like my happy mode, suddenly I'd be like that for like a few weeks, but I still wouldn't necessarily stop. And then it would hit me so hard. And on top of it, my emotions that I guess were underneath all that happy, go, just take over for a day or two or a week. So I think it's really valuable for people to know what stress actually is on your system.
Yes, 100%. And so this is a really beautiful way to kind of circle back to the stress response, right? And so what happens is if we don't process our stress daily through the different various ways we can, it starts to compound, right? And so if we are suppressing and repressing and being like, no, I can handle more, I can keep going, like, because we struggle sometimes with people pleasing and saying no, or knowing our limits, knowing our boundaries, right? Like,
I'm
yeah. And
dancing over here, everybody. I'm just dancing because this is like me. Honestly, it's just me, which is great because I know that about myself now.
totally. And like, this is the thing too. I spent the majority of my life in like functional freeze. And so I'll touch on that in a second. But what happens is if we don't have outlets to complete the stress response, stress then, because this is the thing. You asked, like, what is stress actually? Stress is not bad. Very controversial thing to say. Stress is not bad. Stress is an activating energy that allows us to move. It gets us up in the morning. It gets us to our appointments. It gets us to our Zoom calls. It gets us to the gym. It gets us to take care of our kids. Stress is an activating energy and force that is necessary for us to human and do our day-to-day things. What happens is the stress that we need to get through the day to be activated, great. But then we need to, once we've done what we need to do, then we need to down regulate, right? And that's where we need to like release the activation of the day and go into that rest and digest. What most people are doing, the activation hits right when they wake up in the morning. They've got the activation throughout the entire day. They carry that activation all the way into dinner, into the nighttime routine. And then they go to bed and they repeat. And there's no completing the cycle. And we've normalized this. Like, this is a collective 2024 normal way, unfortunately, which is a big part of why I do what I do, is because I'm like, let's like flip the narrative. Let's flip the switch. This is not how we're meant to be, moving through the world. But what happens is when it's like an on switch. If we are constantly on with our stress and our activation, the body, the nervous system is highly intelligent. And eventually, when you're on, like, vibrating at this really activated frequency, eventually your nervous system will shut down. And that's when we go into freeze, burnout, depression. And so I think of it as a ladder. And so at the top of the ladder, we're like energized, we're calm, we're connected, we're inspired, we're curious. It's all those like really yummy C words that are just like compassion, connection, creativity, calm. And that's when we're, able to experience our stress and release our stress. And then when we're starting to just experience our stress chronically, we go down the ladder. And then when the stress is on for a really long period of time, we drop to the bottom of the ladder. And this is like a ladder reference from polyvagal theory, but essentially when we're at the bottom of the ladder, it's like you're at the bottom of the well. You don't have resources. You don't feel inspired. You don't feel connected because you've spent too long in fight or flight, not allowing yourself to return to a baseline. So that's what I mean when I say stress isn't bad. It's when we've got this switch turned on for so long that leads us to burnout, right? So it's really radical to every single day check in with yourself and be like, I need to, calm down. And keeping in mind, we go through seasons, we go through cycles, right? We could go through a really busy time, right? Like if you're working on a project or on a TV show and you're working like 12, 14-hour days for a couple weeks or a month, or someone's at a busy season in their job and they're putting in the extra hours, right? Sometimes we have to, but we need to get really discerning and diligent about taking care of ourselves because the world is going to expect us to keep up. And one of the most radical, beautiful things you can do is learn how to attune to yourself so that you don't fall into freeze and burnout, so that you can show up for all the things that matter in your life, right? Like relationships, your creativity. So that was just a long-winded way of saying stress isn't bad. It's when we don't allow stress to move and it compounds over time that then it starts to wreak havoc on our lives, on our relationships, on our finances, like all that.
Yeah, I like the terminology of completing the cycle you introduced me to that. It's made a big difference because it helped me understand that stress will be there and stress is good, but it needs to complete its cycle, whether that is an emotional release, whether that is a physical release, whether that is whatever it is, but it just has to complete the cycle. Would you say that the cycle is complete when you're in that full state of rest?
That's a great question. I would say that it really is a felt sense. And the thing is, if a person, I'll use myself as an example. I was in such chronic fight or flight for majority of my life until I really dropped into the freeze in my 20s. But there is a level of dissociation, right? So you kind of talked about how, like, you know, when you feel really in your body, like when I finish a really juicy yoga class and I'm in Shavasana and I have like worked it out and I'm lying there, I am so connected to like the cells in my body, right? Most people are walking around in the world disconnected and dissociated from their physical soma, right? Like when we talk about somatics, we're talking about body. And so it's interesting, right? Because I think because you can ask some people, right? Like, how do you feel? People are like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? And so this is the thing. A big part of nervous system work is recognizing that a lot of us have been living our lives dissociated from our actual bodies, right? And so when you ask, like, is it about completing the stress cycle? It's about reconnecting to your body, right? And so, for example, you know, if we're on a coaching call, right, and we're talking, there's like potential dysregulation or stress in the body, I've introduced tools and things to help you almost like re-inhabit your body. Because when we're stressed and we're in fight or flight, we're just trying to survive, right? Our nervous system just wants us to survive. And so sometimes that means that we have to like jump up and out of ourselves. And so the practice is actually being able to be with the body during the stress. And like you said, like maybe it's an emotional release, right? Maybe it's just having a conversation with someone and hearing yourself express. Like that sometimes is completing the stress cycle. Maybe it's a vigorous run. Maybe it's, I do a lot of lying down on the ground and doing hip opening stretches like that for me. So it's a lot more broad, but ultimately it's about re-inhabiting the body and like teaching your nervous system that there is not a tiger chasing you, right? Like you're not in imminent danger. But that's the thing, is we don't realize that when we're experiencing those stresses, the nervous system thinks that we're in real life or death danger, right? And so it's teaching the nervous system that we're okay, like we're safe, we're going to be all right. And so that's why something like breath work, you're putting yourself into a stress response and you're teaching the nervous system that it's okay and it's safe. And then that's how you increase your capacity to be with discomfort, right? So
yes. Okay. I'm going to jump on that because I want to talk about nervous system capacity a little bit. It's something I find extremely phenomenal. It's very frustrating sometimes, and you know this from our voice notes, when I'm hitting like my threshold of that capacity. It's for anyone who hasn't experienced this from that place of knowing, the best way I can explain it is when I'm doing something new, when I'm doing this podcast, when I'm pushing my own comfort zone of how much I'm opening up, how much I'm sharing. And then I start getting this like icky feeling and I'm starting to get frustrated and I'm starting to get emotional. Like even now, it's like for me, I feel it in between my shoulder blades. It's just like uncomfortable. It's this twitch, it's this itch. And then what happens is I start kind of coming back onto myself of my own little triggers or things I'm working on come up, like my perfectionist will start to come up and be like, you know what, maybe you shouldn't have said that. Maybe we need to edit that out. So for me, I'm learning in real time of how I know when I'm at the capacity of my nervous system is that feeling of the world is starting to close in on me a little bit, starts to get a bit more intense.
Yeah. As soon as you said that, I just thought of like, it's like tunnel vision, right? It's like, and I put my hands up by my eyes right now to create that tunnel. And so this is the thing when we're in contraction and, we're meeting our edges. And with that, like I have my fists squeezed together right now. And so with all of that contraction, typically our perspective can get really narrow. And then when we think of expansion, and now I'm opening my hands and I'm opening my perspective, there's more possibilities, there's more potential, right? And so again, it comes back to this idea that when we're in that contraction, it's like we're bracing. And I'm just going to use the example you just shared. Like, as human beings, we all have this deep primal desire and need to belong. And if we don't belong, then we might not be safe, right? Because we take that back to the very beginning of evolution. And it's like, if you didn't belong in the tribe and you were ostracized, like you were probably going to die that night. And so, for example, like when we let's bring this into like present day, when we are entrepreneurs and we're putting ourselves out there and we're being vulnerable. And sometimes when you're thinking, the example you just used of, should I have said that? Right? That perfectionist, but the actual root of that is, should I have said that? Because is that going to potentially risk me not belonging? Which comes back to that very primal thing. And so when we think about like all of our patterns as humans of like people pleasing or perfectionism or overextending ourselves, like all of those behaviors are actually deep subconscious survival mechanisms and patterns to try to make sure that we belong, that we're safe, that we're going to get fed, that we're going to procreate, that we're going to, you know what I mean? That we're going to, so it's really fascinating. So yeah, so it's this really interesting thing of, and so that's why nervous system capacity is like a muscle in the same way that like, if you want to get more flexible or you want to build your strength and your muscles, you're going to adjust your workout program or you're going to start going to yoga or stretching more. Or so when we talk about nervous system expansion, there's something called the window of tolerance. It's your window with which you can tolerate stress, essentially, right? And so when we talk about nervous system capacity, what we want to do is increase our window and make it wider so that we're able to ride the waves. I always do this with my hands, right? We can ride the waves and they're not like jagged mountain peaks. Because when we are like really reactive, and this is the thing, right? Like this is the whole point, in my opinion, of why we're here as humans and why I'm a life coach is because we're here to self-actualize our highest potential. Lots of people on the planet aren't going to do that because they don't care to. But I think most people who are, heart-centered and just focused on that or have an interest like you and I, it's really about learning how to self-actualize. And a big part of that is learning how to be less reactive to all of the things in life that have put up walls around our hearts and we've had to protect ourselves. And so nervous system expansion work is learning how to ride the waves of stress, learning how to respond instead of react, learning how to listen with love and compassion as opposed to being on the defense, right? That's a huge thing I've learned in my relationship is, the defensive patterns and feeling attacked when I am not being attacked. But again, right, I use those words, but it's like at a nervous system level, what we, I love that we're talking about this is people don't understand that they think they're responding. Your nervous system is responding actually, because what happens is 80% of information goes from the body up to the brain. only 20% of information travels from the brain down. So when you
Wow.
think, yeah, so when you think about it that way, your nervous system is already, there's a whole bunch of terms I could use, but I won't go into those today. But there's your nervous system is anticipating and paying attention at a subconscious level that you're not even aware of. So your body, your nervous system is clocking everything before your actual cognitive mind is.
Okay, wait, pause, because you're blowing my mind right now. So this might be a silly question. You're saying 80% comes from your body to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so your body is processing things subconsciously. So there's that other fact that I've heard. We only use 5% of our brain and 95% is a subconscious mind. Are those two things linked? Like, is your subconscious mind also linked to like that nervous system response?
Okay, great question. So I was actually riffing about this the other day. And think about it this way. Every single time, okay, I'll use myself as an example. When we go through moments in our lives, when I was in grade 6, I got a D on a science test. Okay. It was the first really bad grade I got. And I was at this very nice school that my parents were paying for me to be at. And like my whole world in that moment erupted. I thought my life was over. And so that sounds silly now, but it was a very monumental moment in my life. And that moment left an imprint in my nervous system. And that imprint in my nervous system became a limiting belief that I was stupid. And I carried that imprint, that limiting belief subconsciously with me for the rest of my life. And so that moment on my nervous system where I didn't do well on the test and I felt threatened. I was like, even though I wasn't going to get kicked out from my house and not fed and loved, I felt in that moment like I'm not going to be loved by my parents because I did so badly on this test. Okay. And so when you ask that question of like, is it correlated? I think that the subconscious and the nervous system are deeply connected to each other because every single time there's an imprint, like that moment left an imprint on me that then affected so much about my life, how I showed up, what I thought about myself, like all of these things, right? So, but in that moment when I was like, in the bathroom in the grade 6 washroom staring into my eyes, I didn't know that I wasn't stupid. You know what I mean? And because of the stress that was going through my body, it really got implanted. So let me know if that answers your question. But the subconscious is, yes, 95%. So these are all of the limiting beliefs, the programs, the past that is dictating our present moment, right? And so many people think that they're consciously choosing moment to moment, but your past, right? If you've been on the planet for 30 years and you're 34, like you've got 30 years of data. You've got 30 years of stored memories of moments of all of these things that are 100% affecting how you are perceiving, seeing the world and making your choices. So that's where it comes back to the self-actualization piece, the like really understanding who we truly are. We're not what's happened to us, but that has definitely played a really big role in our nervous system capacity and our ability to like be courageous and take risks and take chances in life, right?
Yes. Okay. So on that note of we are not our past, but it definitely has an effect and an imprint of how we react or respond. Talk to me about the term somatic healing.
Yes, somatic healing. So somatic is the body, the soma. And I don't know about you, but I have done my fair share of talk therapy. And I definitely got lots out of it. But I always kind of felt like a little bit, as someone who's extremely curious and has like read as many books as I possibly can about psychology and trauma and like you name it, I almost felt like I already like intellectually, cognitively going to therapy felt fine, but it didn't really feel like I was actually getting this like deeper support. And what I've realized now is, Bessel van der Kolk wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So talking is helpful, but again, the nervous system doesn't like to use words. The nervous system likes to feel a felt sense of safety in the body, right? And so that's why I got really into somatic healing, because so much of the healing and the safety that we need to cultivate in our bodies doesn't come through talking about the pain that we've been through over and over and over again. It's actually about, like I said, not being dissociated and like floating above bird's eye view in your life, but by actually getting back into the body and getting reacquainted with yourself. Because so much of the time, especially as women, we can spend so much time overthinking, over analyzing, really being in our minds. And if we struggle with rumination or catastrophizing or chronic stress, which was me my whole life, I'm not solving anything by staying up in my brain. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's actually about getting back into the body, getting reconnected and reattuned to the body, and creating that safety there, and then adding in the mind, adding in the rational, the logical. And then if you actually think about it in the feminine, masculine, like the feminine is all about being in the body, being connected, right? Like being really attuned. And the masculine is all about rational, logical, structure, analytics, which is very mind. And so, I won't go into the whole, patriarchy conversation today, but it's also a reclamation of like getting back into the body and getting reconnected to intuition and inner knowing is really, really powerful, because, there's a place for rational, logical talking, analyzing, and then there's a place for dropping into the body and healing without speaking, by actually feeling and attuning to the soma, to the body.
And I want to dive into specifically, Blythe, of what are ways of somatic healing. I know we've talked a bit about breath work, but other things, just little introductions that people can understand more from a practical way.
Yeah. So like a really beautiful practice that I can offer right now, that I do a lot with my clients, that I do with myself, it's called orienting. And so what can happen if we're like really charged with that stress, with that activation, and maybe our mind's running and we're just feeling overstimulated? A really beautiful practice is to just sit down in your, wherever you are really, but like right now I'm sitting in my apartment and I'm sitting in a chair, and underneath my feet is like a very cozy, fuzzy sheepskin kind of rug. And so orienting is sitting down wherever you are and taking a moment to really notice and feel your butt sitting on a chair or the bed or the floor, really feeling the bottoms of your feet pressing down into a surface. Sitting back, like leaning back, that's a really beautiful way to just not be in that activated brace, but leaning back, feeling your back being supported by the surface behind you. You can place your hands into your chest, your belly, or even just bringing a bit of pressure from your hands into your body. And then softening your gaze and looking around and noticing whatever it is you notice. So right now, I see a lamp. I see a big clear quartz crystal. I see my lip balm. I see my laptop. And I'm just taking a moment to orient myself and notice. This is a huge word, noticing. When we are dysregulated, when we are stressed, we're not noticing what's around us because we're so consumed and flooded because we're so activated. And so small practices like this, like I remember when I first started learning about somatics, I was like, oh, come on. Like that, go-getter, I want to move fast part of me really was humbled because and Peter Levine is, the founder, the creator of somatic experiencing. He's a great reference. I think his book is called Waking the Tiger. I've done some trainings with him, and orienting is the first thing he teaches. And so for anyone listening, like just practicing sitting down, leaning back, feeling your body making contact with the surface beneath you, starting to bring your awareness to your breath, and just looking around and noticing. That is a quick, I think, simple enough tool that you can start doing, and it's like if you have a moment between meetings, right? Like maybe you're closing your laptop and you've got another meeting in 5 minutes, just take a second to reorient yourself, reconnect, and then carry on. So yeah, that is one tool, somatic tool that's really helpful. One other one that I'll offer, really simple, it's 4-4 breath. So you inhale for 4, and then you exhale for 4. And when you do this, like I do this sometimes if I'm really dysregulated for like 30 minutes. Like I lie down and I count as I breathe. And the 4-4 breath, you could also do 6-6 breath if you're a bit more practiced. It creates coherence between your heart rhythm, your beat, and your brain. It slows down the mind and it connects to the beat of your heart. And this is essentially called heart coherence. So that is another really beautiful tool that's amazing for down regulating and completing the stress response.
Thank you so much. Yeah, what was the first one called again?
Orienting.
I use that one a lot. You introduced that to me. I use that a lot. It just helps. It also, for me, brings me to immediate presence, which it's interesting. And I say this a lot. Sometimes words are the least effective communicator, or there's so many different ways to say a similar thing because experiences like that are difficult to put words to. So orienting, I also consider that a form of meditation,
Yes.
and even the 4-4 breathing is a form of meditation. And I'm so glad you brought this up because I think I say meditate a lot, but I meditate when I do the dishes. I meditate when I cook. Meditation, presence, all of these tools, they kind of become a way of life at a certain point, or they're tools in your tool belt that you pull out. But I might say, sit and meditate with your eyes open for 5 to 10 minutes. Really, that's also just coming into presence. That's coming into your body. That's orienting. We're all saying very similar things. And I just want to highlight that because in this world of self-actualization, self-realization, enlightenment, consciousness, there are so many incredible, profound texts and teachings. And one thing I'm doing with this podcast is also showing how similar these different terminologies and vocabulary are. And it truly is whatever feels authentic and natural to you, which terms or quote unquote exercise you use. But it is so much of it is from getting from your mind, getting from that self-talk that can sometimes be so vicious, and just the fear and the anxiety and the doubt and the worry, and dropping down into your actual body. So all of these exercises, yoga, meditation, breath work, all of them accomplish pushing out of your head, out and in. almost. That's the best way I can explain it, out and in.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like, yeah, you just named a lot of really beautiful words, right? And like meditation, I was reading a book. I think it was The Mountain Is You, because I know we've been riffing a little bit about this book. And she's writing there saying, the idea of meditation, it's not to like just be sitting in stillness and not having any thoughts. The whole point of it, to your point, is like becoming aware of how many thoughts are actually running through your brain, because we're just going through the day, we're not thinking about it. So meditation, these practices actually are an opportunity for you to see what's actually happening and start to, like you said, re-inhabit and go inwards, because so much of our energy is externally expressed. And so these practices, right? It's about, like I said, it's like my favorite word, noticing. It's noticing, oh my gosh, I'm finding it hard to meditate today. My mind is really active. And then maybe 2 days later, wow, meditation feels really accessible today. I don't feel, my mind's not as chaotic, right? So it's not about, whether the meditation went well or the yoga class went well or the breathwork session went well. It's about the like actual practice of doing these modalities to become aware of what is happening within, right? And so, yeah, somatic healing is all about noticing and attuning and having a felt sense of calm that you create by inhabiting your body and not looking outside of yourself for calm.
Yes. You said something once, I think, maybe in our sessions, or I don't know when, but receiving and cultivating safety in the body. This is a term or a phrase that I didn't understand for a very long time. And I think it's really important. And I want you to talk about it. And I want you to talk about why. Why do we want that? And what does that allow us to do once we can actually be open to receiving and we can cultivate safety in the body?
So when you say, just so I can fully, I want to make sure I understand, are you saying what it fully means to receive and feel safe in receiving? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it's like it's one thing to receive, and it's another thing to cultivate safety in the body. And for me, to receive, I have to be in a place of safety in the body. Going back to what we were talking about expanding your nervous system capacity, that threshold.
Mm-hmm.
It's an edgy thing to do, and it takes guts to know when you're hitting that threshold and have that awareness, but then be like, okay, I'm either going to rest or I'm going to see if I can just push it a little bit more. And when I push that threshold, then that threshold that was before, I feel a safety in it. I'm like, I feel good now. I can do this one. So I feel safe enough to do this thing that I've been afraid of doing, because I've cultivated that safety in that threshold. And then I find when I'm in that place of safety, I'm able to receive more, if that makes sense.
100%. Yes. So something that I say, I think I've shared this on my Instagram. I've definitely shared this in sessions, is you can only receive that which feels safe enough to receive at the level of the nervous system. Yeah. And I love this. I remember, it was like the first time I shared that like a couple of years ago, it got a big reaction on Instagram. I was like, okay, there's something here. Like people are like, ooh, tell me all about it. So when it's like in life, when you want to receive more love, or you want to receive more money, or you want to receive more like recognition, whatever it is that you're desiring to receive more, it's only possible that your nervous system will be able to handle more love, more money, more accolades, more recognition, more fame, whatever it is, if your nervous system is on board. Because if your nervous system isn't on board, and let's remember, right, the nervous system, 80% of that information is traveling unconsciously from the body up to the brain. And so when we cognitively think like, I want more of this or more of that, if our body isn't on board, we'll sabotage it unconsciously, subconsciously. And underneath all of that, it's because there's probably a nervous system imprint, like what I brought up in the grade 6 moment, right? Where I had this moment where I was like, I'm stupid. And so later on in life, when all these opportunities came up for me, I sabotaged them because I had that little imprint left on my nervous system, deep subconscious, right? And so I want to correlate that into this question that you're asking, because this is why we can't expect to receive more of the things that we want in life if we don't work on a nervous system capacity and do that work to actually be able to hold and receive it, right? And immediately what comes up for me there is like relationships. If we want more intimacy, if we want more connection, if we want to just feel more connected to our partner, I think a lot of people move through the world being like, I want those things, but it's like, okay, awesome. But if you haven't been able to have a deeper connection or more intimacy or more, we'll just say connection with your partner, what are you doing about it at the level of the nervous system to actually have that? Right. And so that's why it's so important to have these conversations, because most people are on autopilot. And it's not just enough to want more fill in the blank. There is an energetic process that your body needs to go through to calibrate to that level of whatever it is that you want.
Yes. Thank you so much. I don't want to go on too big of a tangent here, but you talk about the world of manifestation and all of that. And these universal laws are very real and true, but I think you put it so well. If your nervous system is not at a place at that capacity to receive what it is you want, you self-sabotage.
No, totally. And I think like the other thing too, like to your point, I just want to add this in is, and this is another somatic tool or term called titration. And so when we think about, I want to be very clear as well when I talk about nervous system expansion and increasing your capacity, right? Like, I'm not saying you need to like get into the ocean and do a 20-minute cold plunge in the middle of winter, right? It's not just about pushing. It's also about the time that you also rest and recalibrate. That is also paramount in helping you increase your window of tolerance and helping you create that flexibility, because while you're expanding, right, you've also got to contract. And when we contract, it's not about pushing through. It is about resting, taking more breaks. That's a huge thing that I do now during the day, because I'll get like flows and I'll like all of a sudden my feet are like numb because I'm sitting cross-legged on my chair and I've just been like in a zone, and I'm like, hey, take a little bit of a break because you're really overstimulated and you're really focused, and your body needs to just remember that everything's okay. We can calm down. So I just wanted to like touch on that. And so when I say the term titration, it's about titrating between pushing ourselves, right? And because pushing ourselves is important, right? It's like you can, you're on the treadmill running and you could stop, or you could just push yourself for one more minute, right? And it's like, yeah, like push yourself a little bit for that extra minute today. And then there's other days, right, where, you're going to show up to a yoga class, for example, and halfway through, you're like, I am so flat out. And then you just make that choice to lie in Shavasana for the rest of that class, right? So I just think sometimes with nervous system expansion work, it's about the titration. It's about the meeting your edge and going a little bit further, to expand yourself, but then also having that discernment and that awareness of when you need to titrate and kind of go, whoa, 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 let's slow down. So it's not just, and I think that's a really beautiful way to bring in the masculine, feminine energetics that we all have, is like that pushing ourselves and expanding our comfort zone is very kind of that masculine energy. And then having the discernment of when we need to slow down and just be more in that receptive, flowy energy. Like sometimes your best way to expand your nervous system capacity is lying down on your bed doing the 4-4 breath. Right? I just hope that's really clear for people. And like, I never thought in a million years I would get into cold water exposure or cold plunging. And now I sit in the ocean for like 10 minutes in the middle of winter. But it's like, that is only possible because of creating that flexibility in my nervous system. So to anyone out there, I never thought I'd be able to do it. And it's wild what can become possible when we prioritize expanding our capacity.
And I'm so glad you brought that up too, because for me, in part of my expanding that capacity of my nervous system was learning truly how to rest and what that is. Because for me, rest equaled to being lazy for so long. And I'm always like, I've got so much mental discipline. It's like, go, 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 go. And I really do. But it took me mental discipline. It took me work to learn how to actually rest. And it's still ongoing. And this is the thing about this work, about understanding your nervous system, about somatic healing, is this beautiful acceptance that it is never ending. There's always an expansion. There's always a contraction of various sorts, but also, especially in 2024, it's so important, I think, for most of us to learn how to rest and how to rest for you. How I rest might be differently than how you rest, right? There is no formula either. There's just a bunch of different tools to try.
And I think you just hit the nail on the head on a really important thing. And it's making me think about human design and the energy centers of the chakras. But when we think about our root center, right, it's like there is always, like you said, there's always going to be stressors in life. And there's always going to be things that we need to do and tasks we need to accomplish and projects and kids and family. Like there's always going to be things. And so I think what's really important is to recognize that there is always going to be a little bit of pressure. And so our job, right, is to be able to discern between like what is like urgently needs our attention and what doesn't. And furthermore, to just remember that, I have like an undefined root. I don't know if we're going to have time to get into human design today, but the point is that I can feel this immense pressure to like just get things done, to feel like, okay, I'm done and now I can rest and everything's fine. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's always going to be things that need to get done. And so to your point, we as humans need to be able to take our power back. And taking your power back is about cultivating these practices, whatever that looks like for you, to call your energy back to yourself, to get back into your body, to notice yourself, right? Because the world is going to keep moving, like things are going to carry on. And so, it's having these little micro moments of checking in, of noticing how you're feeling, of orienting, of breathing, of moving your body, and recognizing that it's, if you haven't been doing anything at all for your nervous system, just from this point forward, just take 2 minutes once a day to just notice how you're feeling, where you're at, and starting there. And then over time, you'll start to feel better. So then you'll be like, oh, I want to do more of this for myself. Right. And so, yeah, to your point, it's just about like, I am about unsubscribing from the hustle because it's not serving us. Right. And so rest is radical, and we need to be very intentional about finding a moment every single day to rest.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to wrap it up here because I feel like we could keep going and we will keep going in other episodes. But as you know, I'm ending every episode by asking 2 questions. So would you be willing to tell me one thing you're grateful for right now and one thing you are growing through?
I am really grateful right now for my partner. And we just had a really beautiful morning today, had some coffee, and we're reflecting actually on how much we've grown together since we met just over 3 years ago. And we were laughing because it's been a journey, and it was just really beautiful. And I'm proud and grateful for the work I've done on my nervous system to be able to receive the love that I am receiving in this partnership with my man. So much gratitude for him and his patience and his strong masculine safety that has allowed me to really soften and receive. So that's what I'm grateful for. What I'm growing through. Yeah, I would say it's so funny because I guess I correlate everything to the nervous system. I'm like, well, what I'm growing through, what I'm trying to, increase my capacity for is, I would say, the growth of my business this year, and wanting to expand and be able to reach more people and support more people. And the investments I make into my own coaching and business and things like that, it feels, growing through that. The investments, which can feel contracty, when you're investing in your business and your growth and your own support, and really learning to trust myself in every decision that I make. And even though it feels scary sometimes, and I said this to myself yesterday, I was like, I know if I had conversations with some people in my life around my business and what it takes to invest and grow, so many people would not understand. And so what I know to be true is that I am growing through really trusting myself and discerning between other people's opinions and the compass of my own heart, and really, trusting myself. And again, I will correlate that back to the nervous system, because I spent my entire life not trusting myself. And so, feeling into that.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Blythe, you are incredible. I love you so much. I have such appreciation. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I love you too. This was such a pleasure, and I am so stoked for you. And I hope to be back to riff about all the other things we could riff about.
You will. You will. All right. Thank you so much, Blythe. And thank you so much for tuning in today, for listening. I hope all these nuggets of gold land however they're supposed to land. And as always, stay grateful and keep growing. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you liked what you heard, hit that subscribe button and maybe send it to someone who you think might need to hear today's message. And let me know how everything's sitting. Leave me a rating and a review, and let me know what's resonating with you. What do you want to hear more of? What's your favorite episode and why? And I hope you find your way back here to another episode, another time, as we keep exploring this beautiful and wild thing that we all call life.